Janalyn lives in Austin, Texas, and works as a grants management consultant. She received her MFA in fiction from Brown University and has published short stories in various literary magazines, including Quarterly West, Heavy Feather Review, and The Collagist. She is currently working on a Choose Your Own Adventure tale as part of the Wander ATX project, which, once complete, will be a narrative access to the various unique landmarks of Austin. As for her favorite flavor of ice cream, though she is somewhat lactose intolerant, everything is worth it for Moose Tracks.
Thanks everyone for coming, and a special shout out to my family that's sprinkled out around here, and my best friend from college who have never seen me read, so this is exciting. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, cool. So I'm reading a story called Bloom, and it is also a bit new. I just finished it, and so hopefully it will be good. My aunt owned a small glass parlor in Flint, China. That was a converted storage space. She slapped a red paisley patterned paper on the walls and decorated with a few animal figurines, vases full of long peacock feathers, and some candles. Soft music played in the background. Only 6 cots fit inside the room, almost touching at the corners. My aunt's customers, lying shirtless on their bellies, explained their ailments to her as she poured a homemade ointment onto their backs and rubbed it into their skin. She scraped their backs with a wooden tool until red, sand-like blotches appeared. Pointing at the red zones, she explained to her customers what they meant. Weak lungs, weak heart, excess fire, or wind. Bodies glistened with perspiration, and heat rose out from them into the room. I handed my aunt glass bowls, one by one, for the cupping process, which she performed immediately following glassa to help the blood flow. They came in a variety of sizes to fit the many parts of the back. My aunt swirled a piece of flaming cotton around in each cup before quickly sticking it onto a bare back. I watched the skin rise into each cup, muffin-like, and turn purplish in color. Sucked up into a multitude of glass orbs, parts of the back would grow so taut that pores that had once been invisible darkened into black holes as they stretched open. My aunt performed the final steps with a cold precision. She twisted the cups off one by one and studied the shade of the purple welts. She told her customers to refrain from bathing for a few days because their pores were wide open and vulnerable. It was springtime. I was staying with my aunt after a year of misfortunes. I had lost my job and had been ill and alone. Well, it was your zodiac year, my aunt said. I bet you didn't bother to wear red. I liked the routine of the parlor. Every day we opened up at 9 and locked up at 4. In the last moments of sunlight, we strolled down the busy streets and around the reservoir, which was lined with trees whose trunks were painted white with medicine. On the way to and from the apartment, there was a farmer's market where vendors cluttered together with their goods. I liked the complicated smell of their presence, the foul odors of seafood and raw meats laid out in pails, and along truck beds tangled with the smells of freshly made noodles and scallion pancakes. There was an abundance of motes, spores, and seed pods raining down on us that spring. They hung lazily in the air, traveled with the wind, clung to my hair and the collar of my coats. On our walks, my aunt told me stories of bodies in bloom, the small batch of customers she had every year whose pores opened up especially big and betrayed them. They returned to the parlor, angry and fearful, to show her that their backs were sprouting flowers, or vegetables, or baby trees. My aunt took them into a private room where she convinced them it wasn't a disease, but a treatment, and helped them tend to their growths. My aunt had a soft spot for them. It turned out that there would be an abundance of people in bloom that spring, something in the air. I saw a number of them in person. They grew close to my aunt and walked around the reservoir with us. I walked arm in arm with a customer who grew peonies, another who grew pears, another who grew a very thin bamboo forest, another who grew water lilies. He is like a great pond, my aunt told me, very weepy when we are alone. Their backs were wide and wild. They explained that a patch of nature living on their backs, though burdensome, provided a number of benefits. It cleaned the blood. It increased the availability of oxygen. Their feelings of pain were lifted. Some back plants provided produce or a fresh, sweet scent that they could carry with them no matter where they went in the city. These were the positives. Among the men in bloom that spring, my aunt fell for a man named Walt Guo. One night, my aunt invited him over for dinner. Before his arrival, we tidied up the house. My aunt's apartment was small but cozy. It was full of plants. She had a fondness for succulents. Their fat stalks cluttered the windowsills, spines everywhere. She liked the rarity of the bloom, and she framed photographs of their flowers over the years hung on the walls of She framed photographs of their flowers over the years. Walt wore a flat cap, an oversized leather jacket, and dress pants. When he took off his cap, I saw that he had once been bald, but was now growing a lush patch of mushrooms where his hair had been. My aunt dropped a bag of hazelnuts on the coffee table and gave us a hammer to keep us busy. Because it had been warm outside, Walt took off his shirt. I noticed that thin white mushrooms were taking over his back, like a milky fur. They moved in a lazy wave as he worked the hammer. "Can I touch them?" I asked. "Sure," he said. He dug out the meat and let the shells pile up on the floor. My aunt came out of the kitchen to cut a few mushrooms off his back and disappeared again to use them in her dish. They were velvety and blooming. I could feel them growing under my fingertips. I plucked one. "Does it hurt?" I asked. "No," he said. "It's just a tingling sensation, like I've forgotten something." "They're growing fast," my aunt said as she came out of the kitchen holding plates full of mini burgers, 2 slices of grilled eggplant with a single mushroom in between. Afterward, my aunt plucked the mushrooms off Walt Guo's back, the way one would pluck out white hairs from a loved one's head. We ate them raw. "I like him very much, but he smells more and more like decay over time." My aunt told me this over tea the next morning after he departed. She had a collection of tea balls that blossomed into a floral arrangement when placed in hot water. One was opening up and spreading its petals in a clear glass teapot. My aunt trained me on the usual guasab procedure so that on days that she wanted to spend with Walt Guo, I could run the parlor myself. I could sense the disappointment in her customers when they saw that my aunt was nowhere in sight. She had many admirers. Most of the customers that visited my aunt were ordinary. They had good jobs and watches and demanded glasses of water in gruff voices. When I performed the procedures on them, they often remained stoic or complained that my style was different. Every so often, one of them would leave a gift for my aunt, a hen quivering in a rice sack, or a giant fish wrapped in wax paper. I knew they had no chance, though. Then, one day, a customer that I had worked with came back to the parlor to show me what had happened to his back. It had sprouted a bush. Spring was the season of the hawthorn fruit and tonghu, which was a candy that was made by plucking the haw berries from the bushes, coating them in a sugar glaze, and then stringing them onto a bamboo skewer. They reminded me of my childhood. "You did this," he said. I fed him all the lines my aunt used. "This is not a disease," I said. "This is the next step of your treatment." I took him into the private room. Over time, I grew fond of him. I ate tonghu one by one off a bamboo skewer as we went on walks together in the evening. My customer went by the name Rick. He had a habit of plucking handfuls of edible things from the trees around the reservoir and giving them to me to taste. For a month, I would always find old berries in my pockets. The longer I worked with him, the harder it was to tame the wilderness on his back. As I groomed, nature continued to flourish to a point where I tried to tug at a growth or snip at a branch, and Rick would cry out in pain or lose his mind for a moment. I learned from my aunt that nature would eventually take over for each customer in bloom. It was just a matter of time. We talked about it at night when it was just the 2 of us. Walt Guo's decay could not be ignored. I watched his body disappear as his mushrooms thrived. He was so completely covered in them that I could barely make out his face. My aunt and I accompanied him on a trip to the mountains where his ancestors lived, where he burned paper money for them every Lunar New Year. It was where he wanted to spend eternity. On the drive, I read Ovid's Metamorphosis in between sleeps. People turned into birds, stones, spiders, stars, and even mountain ranges. I thought about how my aunt would like that book and made a note to find it. I looked out the window often. It was remarkable how every bit of land was used for some purpose. No wonder plants had started sprouting from our backs, I thought. We wound around the mountainsides on narrow ledges where it seemed like we would slip off the edge into a canyon. Soon, the air began to smell like medicine, and breathtaking vistas of terraced mountainsides opened up to us. When we made it to our destination, a small village at the foot of the mountains, Waltzo explained to us that the people who lived in the area were a matriarchal people. The women went out every day to pick mushrooms and tend to the earth, while the men took care of domestic tasks. 80-year-old women carrying bloated baskets on their backs scaled the mountain with their sickles faster than any of us could. As we hiked up the trail, the clouds moved fast and close, their shadows passing over the mountainsides. Halfway up, Waltzo lost the ability to use his legs, so my aunt and I had to carry him. He was surprisingly light, like he'd been hollowed out as mushroom spores replaced his internal heaviness. It was almost dusk when we'd found a clearing for Waltzo, right where the mountain path curved into shadow and turned into a whole different ecosystem. Goats stood at impossible angles on the cliffs above us. Right here, he said. I remember this exact place. It was getting dark. My aunt and I pitched a tent off the side of the trail. We set Waltzo down in a patch of grass under a tree at the edge of a cliff so that he could see the view. From our place in the tent, Waltzo looked like mushrooms growing from a log in the moonlight. My aunt and I left the next morning. There is a square in the city that my aunt lives in that is spacious and beautiful and for the people. It is lit by multicolored streetlights. I went to it often as a child, hoping something exciting would happen. Street vendors sell desserts and children climb on monuments of old war heroes. People run around it. Groups gather for kung fu or qigong. Elderly women perform coordinated dance steps to music over tinny speakers. They wave colorful fans and rags around in the air. Beyond the square is an elementary school and a small park. And beyond that small park is Rick. The thing about men in bloom is that they grow horizontal to us and then become landscape. A bamboo forest, an orchard of fruit trees, a beautiful still pond full of lilies and their glowing blossoms. They live forever. The last time I saw Rick, he was all back, his body weighed down with fruit. He was beautiful. He sat at a bench for a long time, we sat at a bench for a long time before picking out a little patch of ground for him to root. I held his hand, which was the last soft thing to go. I picked leaves from Rick's hawthorn bush to remember him by. On the night I was packing to go home, I showed my aunt Rick's leaves. She walked over to her bed. I never liked it. It was a hard, unyielding thing, like sleeping on a flat slate of rock dynamited out of a quarry. But it was the type of bed that my aunt and all my older relatives were used to. She lifted the bed sheets off of it. I noticed the faint line that split the frame perfectly in half. At the base of the bed, there was a hasp, like on a jewelry box. When she lifted the swing latch, the bed opened up like a net. Inside of it were impressions, rubbed with soft blue pencil strokes. The bed was a storage space for etches of various textures of men's backs. There was an abundance of mushroom sketches at the top. We added a rubbing of Rick's leaf to the collection. It was as if we were performing guasa. As I stood there looking at my aunt closing the bed before me, I performed guasa on that spring. There were indications that processes were happening beneath the skin. The bloom of red indicating distress, then the long restoration. That slim opening of time you received, lit with possibilities, that changed you.
Thank you so much to our featured readers. That was incredible. That was fabulous. This event wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the space that Malvern Books has created, and so we're so grateful for this bookstore. And the only way to have a space like this is if we continue to buy books and come to
to events and share the word with your friends. But we have some picks for you on that back table back there. Is it a $5?
Everything on it is $10 and under, and
$10.
like Anara mentioned earlier, we do have the Awesk Press chapbooks that